the vast library of cosmic memory, your life story exists as an open book, waiting to be read. What if every thought you've ever had, every choice you've ever made, and every path you've ever walked is permanently inscribed in the fabric of the universe itself? Have you ever experienced the strange sensation of knowing something without knowing how? A piece of information that seems to arrive in your mind fully formed, as if pulled from some invisible reservoir of knowledge? Perhaps you felt an inexplicable connection to a place you've never visited, or recognized a stranger's face in a crowd, though you've never met them before. These moments of inexplicable knowing, these glimpses beyond the veil of ordinary perception, might be more than mere coincidence or imagination. They might be momentary connections to what ancient mystics and contemporary spiritual seekers call the Akashic Records, a cosmic field of memory containing all that was, is, and potentially could be. In the silence between your thoughts, in the space between your breaths, there exists a doorway to this universal knowledge. The question is not whether this cosmic library exists, but rather, are you ready to access it? Dear soul traveler, you who has found your way to this hidden corner of knowledge, I invite you today to journey with me beyond the boundaries of conventional understanding. Together, we'll explore one of the most profound and persistent mysteries of spiritual wisdom, the Akashic Records. This is not merely an intellectual exercise. As we venture into this territory where science meets mysticism, where ancient wisdom intersects with quantum possibilities, you may find yourself experiencing shifts in perception that transcend the ordinary boundaries of learning. You are not here by accident. Perhaps something within you has been quietly searching for this knowledge. A soul-level recognition that there's more to reality than what meets the eye. That recognition has guided you here, to this moment of potential awakening. So take a deep breath and center yourself. Feel your awareness expanding beyond the confines of your physical form. For we are about to embark on a journey that might forever change how you understand your place in the cosmic tapestry. What awaits us on this journey is nothing less than a reimagining of what it means to exist as a conscious being in an interconnected universe. We'll trace the concept of the Akashic Records from its ancient roots in Hindu cosmology through its evolution in Theosophical thought and into modern scientific frameworks that might explain or at least illuminate this enduring mystery. We'll explore how Edgar Cayce, known as the Sleeping Prophet, accessed these records in trance states to provide insights that defied conventional explanation. We'll examine how the information within the Akashic Records might shape not only our understanding of the past, but our creation of the future. You'll discover practical techniques for accessing this field of information yourself, methods tested by seekers across centuries and continents. And perhaps most transformatively, you'll learn how the very concept of the Akashic Records challenges our fundamental understanding of time, space, consciousness, and reality itself. By the end of our time together, you may find yourself reconsidering the nature of your own memories, the meaning of your intuitive insights, and the vast potential of human consciousness to transcend the limitations we've accepted as immutable laws. To understand the Akashic Records, we must travel back through time to ancient India, where the concept first emerged in Vedic literature. The word Akasha comes from Sanskrit, meaning sky, space, or ether, that subtle, primordial substance that pervades all of existence. In Hindu philosophy, Akasha is considered one of the 5 Mahabhutas, or great elements. But unlike earth, water, fire, and air, Akasha is the subtlest element, the medium through which all things manifest and within which all things exist. It is both container and contained, both the canvas and the painting upon it. The ancient rishis, or sages who gave us the Vedas, claimed they did not invent these teachings, but rather heard or saw them while in elevated states of consciousness. They described themselves not as authors, but as seers, witnesses to eternal truths that existed independent of human minds. These vibrations, they said, have always existed and will continue to exist until the end of this cycle of creation. In ancient Egypt, too, we find parallel concepts. The Egyptians held a profound belief in cosmic order, what they called ma'at, a fundamental principle that binds the universe together in harmony and truth. Their creation myths speak of primordial waters from which all existence emerged, overseen by the deities who maintained records of all human deeds for judgment in the afterlife. These ancient cultures, separated by vast distances, converged on a remarkably similar understanding that somewhere, somehow, everything that happens is permanently recorded and preserved in the very fabric of the cosmos itself. The first profound revelation about the Akashic Records is that they are not merely passive repositories of information, but active, dynamic fields that interact continuously with our consciousness and reality. They are both the storehouse and the script of cosmic existence. When Helena Petrovna Blavatsky introduced Western audiences to this concept through her Theosophical writings in the late 19th century, she described the Akashic Records as an energetic imprint of everything that has ever occurred or will occur. This wasn't just mysticism. It was a radical reconceptualization of how information and reality interact. Edgar Cayce, the renowned American clairvoyant of the early 20th century, further illuminated this concept. During his trance states, Cayce claimed to access these records not just as historical documents, but as living streams of potential and possibility. For him, the Akashic Records maintained an objective record of a person's real life, because they reported not just actions, but true intent, the soul's authentic purpose beneath the surface of external behavior. Here lies our first transformative insight. The Akashic Records suggest that nothing is ever truly lost. Every thought, every emotion, every action, no matter how seemingly insignificant, leaves an indelible imprint onto the cosmic tapestry. Your joy, your pain, your struggles, your triumphs, all are eternally preserved. Not as static memories, but as living energies that continue to reverberate through the quantum field of existence. Here lies our first transformative insight. The Akashic Records suggest that nothing is ever truly lost. Every thought, every emotion, every action, no matter how seemingly insignificant, leaves an indelible imprint onto the cosmic tapestry. Your joy, your pain, your struggles, your triumphs, all are eternally preserved. Not as static memories, but as living energies that continue to reverberate through the quantum field of existence. This revelation challenges our fundamental understanding of time itself. If all moments exist simultaneously within the Akashic field, then time as we experience it as a linear progression from past to future may be merely an artifact of our limited perception rather than an absolute reality. As we venture deeper into the mystery of the Akashic Records, we encounter profound paradoxes that challenge the very foundation of our conventional understanding of reality. Consider this. If the Akashic Records contain not only what has happened, but what might happen to all potential futures branching out in infinite variation, then what does this tell us about the nature of free will and determinism? Are our choices truly our own? Or are they simply the unfolding of patterns already inscribed in the cosmic memory? The answer appears to lie in a delicate dance between potential and actualization. The Akashic Records might be better understood not as a fixed script, but as a field of probabilities, a quantum landscape of possible futures that collapse into actuality through the focused lens of consciousness and choice. Modern quantum information theory has begun to illuminate this mystery in fascinating ways. Quantum physicists now speak of information as fundamental to the structure of reality itself. The conservation of quantum information, the principle that information can never be truly destroyed, echoes the ancient concept of the Akashic Records with striking precision. Ervin Laszlo, a philosopher and systems theorist, suggests in his work on the Akashic field that what ancient mystics described intuitively might be scientifically understood as a zero-point field, a fundamental medium that underlies space itself and serves as the constant and enduring memory of the universe. Similarly, Rupert Sheldrake's controversial theory of morphic resonance proposes that memory is inherent in nature, with similar patterns influencing subsequent ones across time and space. If rats learn a new trick here in London, Sheldrake explains, then rats all around the world should be able to learn the same trick quicker just because the rats have learned it here. This concept of a shared memory field accessible across time and space aligns remarkably well with ancient descriptions of the Akashic Records. Even Carl Jung's concept of the collective unconscious, a shared reservoir of experiences common to our species or even all living beings, can be seen as approaching the same fundamental truth from a psychological rather than spiritual or quantum perspective. The deeper mystery reveals itself. Perhaps the Akashic Records, morphic resonance, quantum information fields, and the collective unconscious are all different frameworks attempting to describe the same underlying reality. A reality in which consciousness and information are not secondary products of physical processes, but primary aspects of existence itself. How do we bridge this profound cosmic concept with our everyday lives? How can understanding the Akashic Records transform our experience of being human? The first step in practical integration is developing the awareness that you may already be accessing these records in subtle ways. Those moments of inexplicable knowing, those sudden insights that seem to arrive fully formed, those dreams that contain information you couldn't possibly know through ordinary means, all might be glimpses into the Akashic field. Meditation provides one of the most direct pathways to conscious engagement with the Akashic Records. When you begin your meditation practice, focus your attention on your heart center and make a clear request. Akasha, I am open and ready to receive your guidance. Please show me what I need to know right now. Trust whatever images, thoughts, or feelings arise in your awareness, allowing them to guide you without judgment or analysis. Another approach involves what might be called the Akashic Pathway Prayer, a focused intention that creates an energetic connection to this field of information. As demonstrated in some guided meditations, you might visualize yourself surrounded by a sphere of pure light, then state, I ask the divine to surround me in a circle of white light for protection and strength. May I be joined in my intention to expand my soul, to remember who I am and why I am here, as it is written in the Akashic Records. The key to accessing this field lies not in forcing or straining, but in surrendering, in quieting the analytical mind enough to perceive the subtler channels of information that are always available beneath the noise of everyday thinking. As you develop this practice, you may discover insights about your own soul's journey patterns from past experiences that continue to shape your present reality, potential futures awaiting your conscious activation, and deeper understanding of your authentic purpose in this lifetime. This knowledge isn't meant to remain theoretical. When you receive insight from the Akashic field, integrate it through action. Use what you learn to heal old wounds, to make more conscious choices, and to align more fully with your soul's highest expression. Remember that accessing the Akashic Records isn't about escaping this reality, but about engaging with it more consciously. The information you receive is meant to be lived, embodied, and expressed through your unique human experience. From the vantage point of the Akashic Records, we begin to perceive a reality far more interconnected, far more beautiful, and far more meaningful than the materialist paradigm has led us to believe. The most profound insight that emerges from this exploration is the fundamental interconnectedness of all existence. In the Akashic Records, every action, thought, and emotion is connected to the larger fabric of the universe. Nothing happens in isolation, and every ripple in the cosmic web has far-reaching consequences. As physicist William James poetically observed, "We are like islands in the sea, separate on the surface but connected in the deep." This perspective transforms how we understand our individual lives in relation to the collective. Your personal growth, your healing, your evolution of consciousness is never just about you. It reverberates through the entire field, contributing to the evolution of collective consciousness itself. The ancient Hindu texts describe this interconnectedness when they spoke of the Akashic Records as residing in the Hiranyagarbha, or cosmic womb, suggesting that all of creation exists within a unified field of conscious intelligence. Modern quantum physics echoes this understanding when it demonstrates the phenomenon of entanglement, the mysterious connection between particles that transcends space and time. From this transcendent perspective, we begin to recognize that consciousness itself may not be produced by the brain, but rather received and filtered by it, much like a television receives broadcast signals rather than generating them internally. The implication is revolutionary. Consciousness may be a fundamental property of the universe, rather than an emergent property of complex biological systems. This view invites us to reconsider our understanding of death and the continuity of consciousness. If our thoughts, experiences, and essential being are recorded in the Akashic field, then physical death may represent not an ending, but a transition in how our consciousness interfaces with the cosmic information field rather than a cessation of existence. Perhaps most profoundly, this perspective reveals that the universe itself appears to be structured like a vast, living memory system. As Rupert Sheldrake suggested through his theory of morphic resonance, nature itself may possess a kind of inherent memory, with patterns of organization that resonate across time and space. As our journey comes to a close, I extend to you a cosmic invitation, an opportunity to step more fully into your role as both reader and writer of the universal story. The Akashic Records are not distant archives accessible only to mystics and sages. They are the living library of which you are already a part. Your every thought contributes to this field. Your every choice reverberates through this cosmic memory. Your consciousness is both shaped by and shaping the grand tapestry of existence. I invite you to live with the awareness that nothing is ever truly lost. Not your pain, not your joy, not your love, not your growth. All is preserved in the eternal now of the Akashic field, contributing to the evolution of consciousness itself. I invite you to consider that you came into this life with purpose, a purpose inscribed in the Akashic Records that you can access through the quiet voice of your intuition, through the mysterious language of your dreams, through the synchronicities that guide your path when you're attentive enough to notice them. I invite you to recognize yourself as more than a temporary arrangement of matter and energy, to know yourself as an eternal consciousness temporarily expressed through physical form, connected to all that is through the invisible threads of the Akashic field. As you move forward from this moment, carry with you the understanding that you stand at the intersection of ancient wisdom and emerging science, at the threshold where mysticism meets quantum theory, where individual consciousness meets cosmic memory. In the words often attributed to Pierre Teilhard de Chardin, we are not human beings having a spiritual experience. We are spiritual beings having a human experience. The Akashic Records invite us to remember this truth, not as an abstract concept, but as a lived reality. May your journey beyond the veil continue with wonder, with curiosity, and with the profound recognition that you are both the reader and author of your cosmic story, forever inscribed in the memory of the universe itself.